So, hello and welcome everyone to another episode of A Spotlight On. For this episode, we will be talking to Susan. Susan is an incredible HIV advocate, especially championing the voices of women living with HIV, and is the co-host of the award-winning aidsmap Live, which is a web series shining a light on the experiences of people living with HIV from across the world. Susan, thank you so much for joining us
Oh,
for A
thank
Spotlight
you.
On.
Thank you so much for having me. It's wonderful to see you. I'm really sorry that we can't be doing this in person, but
It's so true.
next year, fingers crossed.
Yes, please. 2021.
Yeah.
2021. So, Susan, could you share a little bit about yourself and what you do, please, for the audience?
Sure. Yeah, I've been living with HIV probably for about 21 years. I was diagnosed through just a routine HIV immigration test in America, so it really came as a complete surprise when that came back as positive. But for me, the way that I've coped the most is through information. That's been really helpful and the most empowering thing. And I've worked in the HIV sector for about 18 years. I currently work for aidsmap, the HIV information charity, and it's an issue that's so important to me in terms of ensuring that everyone living with HIV gets effective information, and then just having information in all different ways. So obviously we do things like our website, aidsmap, and booklets, but we're branching out to do a lot more video content. So as you mentioned, we have aidsmap Live and aidsmap Chat, and we've also recently done aidsmap Women, sort of like focusing on the needs of women living with HIV. So keep an eye out, there's going to be a lot more coming up soon.
NAM is an incredible source for information. So yeah, I recommend anybody who wants to learn a bit more about HIV, NAM is a good place to go. It was really, thank you for sharing about like your experience when you were diagnosed and kind of the shock that came with that. A lot of people at camp are not necessarily involved in that diagnosis bit, but I know that for many it can be a confusing time learning about their HIV status when they are told later on in life. You mentioned that having access to information was really helpful for you.
Yeah.
Is there anything in particular that kind of helped you get through and cope with your HIV status?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it was, having that misinformation and myths that I'd had beforehand in terms of HIV. It's like, so kind of thinking that I couldn't have children and I wouldn't have a long life. So actually finding out that what it was even a doctor that when I was diagnosed told me that I had about 7 years to live when I asked. So it was things like that, and actually taking the time to find out, the reality of living with HIV today, and the fact that, if you're on effective treatment, you can expect to live as long as everyone else, potentially even longer, because we get monitored a lot more. And since I was diagnosed, I've had 2 HIV negative children, so you could go on and have kids. So HIV shouldn't limit us having a really fantastic full life and doing all the stuff that we want to do.
Thank you for that. That's a really hopeful message, especially to hear from an adult who's gone through different life experiences, especially having children who are free of HIV, because it's one of the questions that we get during camp and in other spaces when we're working with Chiva young people. Will I be able to have a family? Will I be able to have children who are free from HIV? So it's amazing that you've shared that. One of the other questions that we also get at camp, I've been delivering workshops at camp for a few years now, and one of the things that I've been asked a few times is why the majority of people attending camp are of African or Black heritage. Now, there are different groups of people who are more affected by HIV. Could you talk us through some of those groups and why you think that is?
Sure. I mean, I think that's a really important question, and it's really great that the kids are recognizing that and bringing it up. And I think it's so important, if you have any questions like that, to just ask them. Don't just sort of like worry and keep it in. I actually had a chat with a really brilliant Black doctor today, Vanessa Appiah, about this particular issue. And what she said to me is that essentially, in terms of race and HIV, it's like an onion, in that there's so many different layers that we need to peel off to actually get to the bottom of the issue in terms of why HIV affects people from Black communities more. I mean, obviously, one of the issues is that lots of people living with HIV from Black communities in the UK come from other countries where there was a lot more HIV around than there is in the UK, particularly in sub-Sahara Africa, and like me, from the Caribbean. However, it's a complex issue in that, why is there more HIV in these communities? And I think quite a lot of it comes down to health inequality. So the fact that people in from Black communities are less likely to test for HIV, and that could well be because the messages aren't getting across to people properly about testing. And also it's a matter of having access to treatment. We all know that if you have HIV treatment, you can't pass the virus on, but where people live in countries where they don't even, many people don't have access to treatment, HIV is being passed on a great deal more. So there's lots of different issues as to why it affects Black communities more, and I can go on all day about health inequalities. But as you say, there are other communities in the UK. So, for instance, gay men and women are at increased risk, and very hard. It can be quite difficult for women sometimes to negotiate safe sex, and to say to a guy that they want to wear a condom. So they want the man to wear a condom. So it can be harder for women. But I would say for everyone out there, essentially we need to take more control and ownership of our own health, and do what's right for us to keep us safe above everything else.
Thank you, Susan, because that was a really good explanation for, like you said, such a complex layer of things that contribute to different people being more affected by HIV. And I just want to echo what you said earlier on about asking those questions, like if there are things that we see or that we're unsure of as people living with HIV, it is important to ask those questions and to have those conversations. So thank you. So my next question is, what are your hopes for young people living with HIV now, in the future? What would you like to see?
Oh my goodness. I think that young people living with HIV today need to recognise that you are absolutely unlimited in what you can do with your life. So, I think it's really important that young people living with HIV, I think the number one most important thing for people is to just keep taking your medication. And also, I think it's important that there is much more of a range of, I hope in the future that it's going to be easier for young people to take medication, that hopefully we're going to soon have long lasting injectables. So you just need to go and have an injection, I think once every month or once every 2 months. So I hope there's going to be opportunities like that. And just also, I want the young people living with HIV not to suffer in silence. If you're not happy with your treatment or in any aspect of your life, to feel sufficiently empowered to speak up and to demand the best possible care that's right for you, and to just live like happy, healthy, wonderful lives, essentially.
That's great, thank you. Interestingly, I had another episode of a spotlight on with two doctors, and they were talking about injectables and the hopes and the potential for that. So yeah, it could be really, really revolutionary in terms of like medication, treatment, how people are taking medication, especially for anyone who maybe finds it a little bit tricky to take tablets. So it is exciting. Yeah, it's exciting. Thank you. And my last question for you is, the theme of camp this year is superhero. So can you tell me who's a superhero to you and why?
Oh my goodness. I would say probably superhero to me is someone that I think that you know and lots of your young people may have met, is my very good friend Angelina Namiba. She's my absolute number one superhero in that she helps so many people living with HIV, particularly women and young people all around the world. She sort of like always puts other people first, even when she's not feeling well. She's always advocating for everyone. But also the fact that she's able to do this in a really positive, uplifting way and supports everyone. So I've got to say she's my superhero.
An excellent, excellent choice. I completely co-sign that choice. And it's true, because I think, you know, what you were saying about like sharing the message in an uplifting way. And I think it's so important, because you mentioned myths before and there's sometimes misunderstandings, but being able to share how we're living with HIV in a positive way, in a diverse way, in full range is really important. And Angelina definitely does that. You definitely do that as well. So I hope you recognize that.
Oh,
You
thank
definitely
you.
do that. Living positively with HIV, hands down. So yeah, thank you very much. I don't know if there's anything else you might like to share
Yeah,
before
no,
we...
that's brilliant. I just hope to see all the kids next year in person and give them a big hug.
Yes, no social distancing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Susan.